Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I had some thoughts that came to me just a little bit ago. I'm making this voiceover late Saturday night because I don't want to forget the exact way that this information came to me, because I think it's probably the most significant thing I'm going to say about what's going on in terms of the Ukraine, or the information that flows through me here on this YouTube channel. I think this is probably the most simple and most significant thing I'm going to say on the subject. There'll be events I cover. There'll be, this, that, and the other thing, more videos to come. But in terms of just, the simple outcome of whatever this is that we're watching, it's really only about one thing. One thing that's real, one thing that's significant, and that's if this conflict ended in nuclear war. Before I explain about that, and it's almost self-explanatory, right? But before I get to that, the truth community has devolved into something that's more about sifting through the lies, right? I've talked about that in previous videos, but I'll say it in a much clearer way here. People call this the truth movement, or call it the truther movement, but all it really is trying to figure out what the lies are, right? The majority of people who make content about the truther movement, or the mainstream story, and trying to dissect it, trying to fact check it, are just trying to prove that they're being lied to, right? They're not finding the truth. They're not even looking for the truth. The majority of people listening to this aren't really searching for the truth. It's just a group of people that are calling BS on the official story. But that's not truth, right? That's not seeking truth. It's just getting to the bottom of all the lies, right? And once you get to the bottom of the lies, you don't find truth, right? You find the reason they're lying, or what, they're trying to cover up, and that's trying to cover something else up, or, layers and layers and layers of BS, right? And so we call it the truth movement. I call it truthers and the truth movement, just because that's a shared, way of describing a shared term that we all understand, but it isn't about truth. It hasn't been about truth really ever, right? It hasn't been about seeking the truth or finding the truth, because that's something you do where you get away from the lies, right? You get away from the deception. You escape the deception. You escape this made-up reality. You escaped even the deception of the third dimensional plane of existence we're on, in terms of the earth, right? And you get out of the matrix, and you find the truth. You dive into the divine. You dive into the heart of the matter, right? You go inward, and then you find the truth as it is according to God, right? You don't find the truth by focusing all your attention on the lies and the liars, the magicians and their spells, right? You find the truth by going to the source of the truth, which is God. And so if this, whatever's going on in the Ukraine is just some way of wagging the dog and another distraction to keep the economic system afloat, and, to end the COVID thing and begin something else, right? Start to, motivate the masses into some sort of new Cold War, or whatever it is, right? It just is some BS thing. Well, then really, who cares, right? I don't care. Like, I'm done with this kind of stuff. Like, I just, I'll make fun of it like I'm watching a TV show. I'll enjoy it like I'm watching a fictional show, right? But I don't, it doesn't affect me, and I don't care, right? Because most of the things don't really affect you, other than the BS rules they put in, and the way that they are, motivating or moving people towards a new, material reality, which has to happen one way or another, because the economic system is, bankrupt, right? It is insolvent, right? So the only real thing, in terms of a game changer, would be nuclear war, because nuclear war will change everything on planet Earth, right? They will change the structure of our physical reality. It will change everything about how we live and how we, the strength in our physical beings will be weakened by the devastating effects of, what these prophecies were saying in the Whispers of the Brighter World. And so if there is going to be nuclear war, this would be something that's real. Like it's something that's an actual consequence, not some made up thing, not some biological weapon that's released, not some, fake contrived wars. I mean, it affects people, right? People who are, caught up in the countries being invaded. I mean, there are real consequences for people in all of these psychological operations, right? All these things have consequences for some people. COVID had consequences for many people, right? Some people died. I got sick. I mean, I got really sick, but the consequences were good, I think, unless there's some long term damage to my physical being. Like I sort of, had a renaissance and I have invested more in my physical health, which I think is going to pay off for long lasting results. But again, if there's nuclear war, then what does it matter, right? And so the thing to think about is if this ends up in nuclear war, then it'll be a thing. It'll be a real thing. It will have, profound effects. It'll be the most significant thing that has happened in the Kali Yuga, this last 5,000 year period, in all of our lifetimes, right? It is the singular collective event that we'll experience that will change everything. Anything short of that is just another one of their bogus things, right? And neither one we can control. Like if this is going to end in nuclear war, then, it's going to end in nuclear war, right? We can't control it. We can't stop it. We can't do anything about it. And so that's where we are right now. It is. I mean, we're just waiting and seeing if this is just some sort of wag the dog type of a thing, or whether it is something that has the ability to, or will likely take the world from a time of abundance into a time of deprivation, where there has been an abundant period of time that the earth has been a great place to live, to where it's going to be some shithole, some post-apocalyptic nuclear scorched shithole, right? And so, that's what we're seeing. Like, it's going to be one or the other, right? If it doesn't end in nuclear war, then it's going to be something that just fades away just like everything else. No reason to stress about it. Some people will suffer, some, it'll affect some people negatively, but, collectively, everything will basically be the same, right? But if it's a nuclear war, a world war that affects, the whole planet and takes the quality of life down significantly here and changes everything, right? It changes, our purpose of being. It takes down the system, everything we're used to, our lifestyle, all of it, right? It's impossible to even think about all the ways it'll affect us. And most of them on a material level will be negative. And so that's what we're waiting to see, right? Is this just, a wag the dog thing? Or is it something that's going to, change the course of the future of humanity? Okay, continuing from where I left off last night. When I do these late night voiceovers, or, even videos, like sometimes I have trouble sleeping or whatever it is, or I'm just thinking about something, I'm wide awake. I don't feel tired at all. And so I'll get up. I've done like a 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Before. And, they're going to be a little bit different because I'm going to be, in a different state of mind. The period of day that I make the video is going to affect it. But I think it's a good voiceover. Like if I was smart or dedicated, I would listen to the first part this morning. Which I should have done, and I could have done. I could have played it while I was searching through the news. And I got a bunch of Ukrainian stuff to get to, some weird stuff on Saturday Night Live. I haven't seen it, but it looks really goofy. And a bunch of headlines and other stuff from the so-called war. But before I get to that, and one kind of funny meme. But before I get to all that, what we're talking about in terms of a potential nuclear war is, an extinction level event, something that it's hard for any of us to think about or understand because how sweeping the changes will be, right, to all of us. Because, and not just human beings, but every form of life on Earth will be affected by this event. And when I'm talking sweeping changes, I'm talking about, all the things that we've learned to do or we've adapted, especially younger people, in terms of, life through the internet, life through a cyber reality, life through what's not in the IRL, in the real world, right? Things that happen outside of in the real world, you know? Like there's a term for it, which is should be disturbing. Well, that'll be gone, right? So there'll be, there won't be those distractions. There won't be a place to escape the real world. But the real world, which is great now, which is, I mean, so much better than it's going to be, is going to be, like a nightmare. And so there won't be any escape. And where, young people are used to dwelling, used to, in terms of spending most of their waking hours in screens and the internet and, whatever else. There won't be that, but the real world won't be nearly as good as it is now. And so both things are going to be drastically changed. One thing will disappear, and the other thing that, people have been escaping from will be a nightmare, be a post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear war type of reality. And for most people, the drastic changes to the New Deal they're about to get, it will be too much for them, right? They can't imagine, they can't, adapt to what life is going to be. If they escape the first wave of death, then, it's sucky, right? Then they have to deal with this new deal, this new reality. I mean, there's a blessing and a curse here. And the blessing part, the curse part is, self evident. But the blessing part is that according to these Whispers of the Brighter World messages that I've read in a couple of these videos, that this is a necessity for the demonic path that we're on, going away from God, to be reversed. It's going to take a massive, I guess, tragedy or just a complete screw up, right? It's going to take a massive fuck up like this, human mistake, human error, to reverse our course, right? To reverse, the direction humanity's going. And that's unfortunate, but it's a necessity. So it's a blessing in that, when the cyber world disappears and the real world sucks and is, almost uninhabitable and painful and all these things, it will force people to go within. It'll force people to take responsibility for mistakes they've made personally and mistakes humanity has made, and connect to God and, have a really rich internal spiritual life. And this is why it's important for the heartfulness meditation to be known about as an option. Because people who would never do the meditation now, this is the counter movement to this, the end of our nuclear society, the nuclear family, all these things, right? That the heartfulness meditation is given for people to redeem themselves as a species and individually by connecting to God internally through the transmission and cleaning and develop a rich internal life. And, this is a complete blessing for the soul, right? Everybody's soul will benefit from, this new reality, right? And because material life won't be as enjoyable as it used to be, it will be just a struggle. People become, less self-centered, less entitled, less, all the negatives of our modern day culture, and will be service-oriented and will sacrifice for their loved ones and, put other people and God in front of themselves. And, so in all those ways, it'll be a blessing on a spiritual level. But it's really unfortunate that it has to come to that, right? It has to come to a situation where, like, there is this glaring tragedy, like a complete screw up, like just human beings, like just effing up the whole planet, just, I mean, in an embarrassing way, like an embarrassment as a species, right? Like the stupidity of it, the lack of maturity and, whatever demonic entities or whatever, reason that we were given this level of destructive power and just, like the immaturity and the stupidity of human beings that would come to where we would almost just, completely destroy and make this planet uninhabitable, right? And be on the brink of, complete utter catastrophe by our own stupidity, right? Just like, why would you ever build weapons like this when you know how bad people suck and can suck, and how, impulsive and stupid they are, and how petty, and, I mean, it's just like just not being able to big picture things at all, where they would, any of these nuclear weapons, and the whispers messages I read previously to this, where he says that these weapons hurt the country that uses them, right? Like, it's not like, you use them and you get off scot-free. I mean, they're all going to come back to haunt America, Russia, or whatever countries that engage in this stupidity, right? So, like, it's just an embarrassment to all of us, like that we would be that stupid. Like, you would, build something that would, have the potential to do the damage to ourselves and the planet that we need, right? Like, it's just, if you think about how stupid that is, like, I have the ability to, a person would have the ability to, or a group of people, build something that would potentially wipe out all life on planet Earth. And whatever, reason they came up with, oh, we got to do it before the other guys do it, because we got to have this weapon before they have to deter them from using whatever, like, reason there would be. And somebody would have built it. Like, that's how it is, right? Because human beings are, like, violent and stupid and short-sighted and, paranoid and all these things. I mean, the paranoia is what really drove this madness, right? And, demonic entities, negative souls, can use these things against you. But anyways, getting back to the changes. The thing is that when there's that drastic change in your life, and it happens to people, it happened to me where I had to reinvent my, my life and purpose in terms of my material life when I was, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, going through a divorce and the intergenerational family farm collapsing, the goal that we had as a family, all of it, right? And, my relationship to the Heartfulness organization and all these things, and this YouTube channel taking off. And so it takes a lot of life energy when you've put everything into, let's say, retirement, or you put everything into a future that no longer exists and is no longer possible, right? Like, I've been thinking about death lately. Not really, it's, related to this nuclear, whatever it is, this thing in the Ukraine, and certainly the whispers messages that are, talking about this as being something that is going to occur in 2025 or 2026 or whatever it is, right? Coming up in 4 years, basically. And so, I've been thinking about this outside of that. Like, my wife and I watched that show Afterlife, and, even before that, there was just, this had been on my mind. And that when, all of these things happen and there's drastic changes to our, our everything, everything that's going on here. And, these kind of things, these kind of changes favor the youth. Like, the youth are far more adaptable than people as you get older. And as you do get older, first, like, the generation of your elders dies off. Your parents, your mentors, your teachers, your older, everyone who is older than you, sometimes not, even people who were younger than you, and your peers, your siblings, so all these people who are, the level of people that taught you or was there to take care of you die off, like, they're all gone. And then you move into that, stage of life. You're like, oh, now I'm an old person. Like, that now I'm an elder, right? And then things change in terms of the way that we do things, especially now in the technological era, that things like, for old people, it's hard to keep up with all the changes, and, music changes, and, everything that you knew, like all the TV shows, all the, whatever it might be. And it can be anything, even without the technological, advancements we have. But when there's, like, drastic changes to the social system and the way that people view things, and, like, all the changes you see, it's not what you're used to. It's not, and you look back at it, and you look at, how much better it was before when you grew up or whatever it might be, like how much better it was for me than the kids who are growing up today. A lot of the changes we don't understand, you don't really understand the youth, and you're sort of out of date and out of touch. And then the people, your peers, start to die, like friends of yours, people your age, you know, and you start seeing people like, oh my God, look how old that guy is, right? You know, somebody you went to high school with. And you realize, oh man, that's me too. That's the way I look. And so, and your body just doesn't work as well. Like I talked about this woman, Madame Malin, who did the whispers of the Brighter World messages, and she was in constant pain. Master Chargy, one time Dodgy, came out and said, right at the end of Master Chargy's life, and he said, you can't imagine the physical pain that he's in because he had this really, devastating leg pain, aside from other physical ailments. He had from a past life of being a slave. He was like Spartacus or something from, I guess, Rome is that or whatever, one of these, famous people. And he was in chains and, in that past life, and that affected him in terms of leg pain in this life. And he had other, ailments and things. He had bone cancer and prostate cancer, and he had, could only see out of one eye barely, and he couldn't, he was hooked up to a respirator at times. And I mean, he was just, and he was kept on going, kept on working, kept on chugging along as best as he could. He had his good days, but he was in constant physical pain. And as you get older, you start feeling that, right? When I had both COVID and Omicron, especially the Omicron, the COVID was just the fear that you feel when you have trouble when you can't breathe, right? People are asthmatic. I mean, it's like a fear-based thing because you're trying to breathe but you can't. It's just, it sucks, right? But for the Omicron, there was a couple of days there that I just didn't have any vital energy. I was just, I wasn't necessarily in pain, but I was, just like almost in a coma-like state, right? I just couldn't do anything. Barely, just getting out of bed to go to the bathroom or whatever was like an act of like complete will and just, just how lifeless I felt, just laying in bed and just having no vital energy or strength. And so as you move forward and you have more physical pain and you go through various physical crises and you just don't have the physical strength you had when you were younger and, to pull yourself back up and, get going again. You don't have the desires and the, physical desires and whatever it is. Like you don't have the, just the youthful energy you used to have to go out and do things or whatever, right? You get up and you groan because they're sore all the time. Like, just these types of things. And even when you're young, you get sick or you're tired, you overexert yourself and you're so tired that you just want to go to sleep. And that's, similar to, the best way of dying, right? And the heartfulness system, you die in some, peaceful way and all the divine beings are around you to, the liberated souls, as Lology, that first master of the system, called them. Like he was dying. He said, I know I'm dying because all the liberated souls are here to, escort my soul back to the brighter world, what's called the brighter world in the heartfulness system. And you start meditating and, getting in touch with the, spiritual aspect of yourself, right? You start drifting away from the material world more and more and get into this meditative state. And you're making contact with the etheric part of yourself, and your soul is getting ready to leave and, leave the material world and go back to, the etheric part. And that's what happens when you go to sleep too, as well. When you meditate, you're forgetting about your body and you're paying attention to the part of you that's eternal, that's going back, leaving this, this world, this video game-like world, and your avatar is going to sleep, and then your essence is returning to the real source of yourself, right? That's, part of what the heartfulness meditation does. It prepares you for the journey back. It's an internalized journey that takes no time at all, but it's, a journey still, a journey from having being encapsulated in a physical body to being, in a spiritual state of being. And so, there's more of a desire to sleep, right? You just want to leave the physical world. And, when you have really bad migraines and just things like that, and you just want the pain and suffering to end. And then on an emotional level, is there any fight left in you, right? Like there was a time when I was 5 years ago when I was just, worn out and just, the thing that was everything I was going through in terms of the divorce and, all these other negative things I was going through. And there was a moment where I just heard like a voice say, get up and fight, right? Just, you got to fight back. And do you have that in you? Like, do people have that in them in a post-apocalyptic type of situation? Because your soul, in some cases, the people who have moved along spiritually, your soul's coming back here, in a negative, post-apocalyptic situation, but there's huge opportunities for your spiritual advancement. So your soul wants to get right back into earth and, and take advantage of this time. People who have done even people who started the Heartfulness system and took the original sittings and then just quit immediately or just, didn't pursue it. Their soul is like, oh, wow, that was great. We need to take advantage of this, right? And so people are born back into, a difficult situation on a material level, but, what's going to be a boon on a spiritual level. So there are a lot of choices for people to make in terms of how long they're going to stick it out and, what they have to offer and how much fight they have left in them, how much ability they have to adapt to the way the world's going to be, right? And so if this is heading in that direction, like as I believe I said last night when I made the first part of this, right? If this is just some wag the dog kind of thing, then whatever, right? It's just another, okay, yeah, that's just like some goofy way to, move people in one direction or another, just deception. But if this ends up being like a real thing, which we haven't seen so much, all these deceptions have real life effects on people, but they're still, man-made and controlled. And the system keeps on chugging along. But if this ends up being a system-ending thing, that's what's on the table, right? Like, what are you going to be able to do? Like, some people, it'll be right away. They'll live in a place that gets hit or whatever by, the full force of the nuclear explosions. And then there's the people who live outside of that that'll survive, but are not going to be in good shape because of radioactive poisoning and all these things, right? Where now you have to drastically change the way that you live. And can you adapt? And, why would you adapt? And, everything that you knew is gone, right? So it's just, like having like somebody just turned a switch off and everything's changed and it's not as good on a material level. And so that's what everyone has to face. Like understanding that this is the potential to happen, preparing yourself as best as possible and understanding the benefit. And the benefit is spiritual. The benefit is on a soul level because your soul's eternal. Your ego and your physical body, you're going to die one way or another. It's a finite, experience and a very short-lived experience compared to the eternal nature of your soul, right? Your soul lasting from the beginning of the universe, the beginning of the creation of the universe, all the way to the Mahaparala, which is when the universe implodes on itself and everything starts over again. We're talking about, like trillions and trillions of years, quadrillions of years, whatever it is, right? Just a very long time. And your life is, 70, 80 years, right? Like, so, you have this sole purpose and, there's opportunities here. Anyways, so let's go to the, headlines and things and Saturday Night Live and the rest of it. Okay, so let's start here with a couple of memes. And just like that, COVID was gone. Now, it's a great meme because that's a wonderful picture. Like Putin's face and the hat. It's just comically done. And this one, Russia man bad, and there's Jojo Magoo and the President of Canada and the Prime Minister of Great Britain. All, all the wars and just the hypocrisy and the lack of consciousness of all the wars and the things that have gone on. So I look at various liberal news sources every day. Here's MSNBC. Kiev survives third night of bombing on West as West squeezes Russian economy. And there's just all these headlines on a daily basis. And this is what they're focused on. Russia keeps pummeling gas pipeline blown up, fierce Ukrainian resistance. A lot of just, like they're covering this in a complete different way than they covered the wars that we were engaged in. All these various Arab Spring wars, right? And it's completely different, where they're covering it from the victim's perspective. You see this all the time. It's very subjective in the way that they cover things, right? Like in Russia, when people protest, they're heroes. In America, when people protest, they're terrorists, right? Like it's just, how they do these things, right? All of a sudden they care about the people who are being hurt by the war. But in America's recent wars, those were justified. America's a hero, and civilian casualties don't happen and are never to be discussed. New York Post, war rages on. And so, pretty much all these publications, these are the ones that I see on a daily basis, but all of them, this is what they're covering, and it's going to be like this for a while because, they're selling this pretty hard. And, where is this at, right? Like, how real is this thing? How real is the conflict? And at what point do they lose control over it, even if it's a controlled narrative? Canceled comic Louis C.K. rumored to perform in Kiev amid Russian invasion. Joy Behar wouldn't go to Italy. At least Louis C.K. is funny. And he's in Kiev performing, so, what's happening there? That's from a couple of days ago. Why would Russia want to take Chernobyl? There's a wonderful, I think it's an HBO series about Chernobyl that my wife and I watched. And enjoyable and, kind of informative. Fictional, but, based in the real story there. So these are headlines from various days I've just left up on my toolbar. Russia meets resistance from the Ukraines. This is, for whatever reason, like some people think this is completely fake. Some people think it's just a distraction because of ending COVID. There's all kinds of, like I said, wag the dog possibilities. There's like lots of ways why Russia's Ukraine invasion should matter to Americans. Well, really, should it? Why more? Why? What about the Libyan people? What about these are things that America did as a country, right? These are things that the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. There was like 2 million people killed, but it really isn't just that. It's the after effects of what life was like there, right? How was life after America had these invasions and regime change wars that left the country worse off and the people are suffering more. And Americans are oblivious, right? Americans, like Putin is bad because, I don't know, the media told. It's just, it's hard to watch. It's hard to conceive of the vast level of stupidity. Speaking of which, let's go to Saturday Night Live. So Saturday Night Live decided to weigh in on this because, of course, they did. They suck at what they're supposed to do, which is be funny. So they, brought the Ukrainian choir of New York in.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Ukrainian Chorus Dumka of New York.
The Doomkins. They brought in the Doomkins. See, Saturday Night Live sucks and it's not funny. But on top of that, it's supposed to, this is the job of Saturday Night Live, is to speak truth to power. And not Putin's power, American power. And they failed to do that. They failed to do it with American wars. They failed to do it with, all the abuses that have happened recently in America. And they just shilled for what can only be considered some sort of satanic agenda, right? And so they don't get to do this. They don't get to bring out the Doomkin choir, right? And pretend like they're, relevant and they're, they just don't. Like they suck at their job of, making they make crappy sketch comedy, and it's not funny, and so they don't get to be like this. So all of a sudden they care about the Ukrainian choir and their traditional, I don't know, ancient Ukrainian outfits. I mean, come on, right? Like this is the kind of thing that people with a comic mind make fun of. Like before this, a month ago, they say, "Do you want to have the Ukrainian choir on Saturday Night Live?" No, thanks. Right? No, we don't think so. Why would we do that? They'd make fun of it or whatever it is, right? But all of a sudden, they care about the Ukrainian choir, the Ukrainian people, because of what, right? There's some other things I'm going to get to. Madonna did a thing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of celebrity stuff I'm going to get to, but it's just, don't try to insert yourself into this thing, right? Don't try to be a part of some like what potentially could be a wag the dog kind of thing, or end of life as we now know it. Don't pretend like you're a part of the solution because you're not. Don't pretend that you have been on the right side of history because you aren't, right? Like, just go back to sucking at what you do, I mean, you're going to do that anyway, like, but don't try to insert yourself into this thing because, it's just cringe.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
And there's a Kiev, I don't know, they got a bunch of candles on. I just, come on. The candles, right? All right. This is just like, if really offensively, like horrible. Like it's offensive to comedy. It's offensive to people who speak truth to power. I mean, it's just all of these things. Okay. So to wrap this up, I made a video, a couple days ago. And I talked about how Jojo Magoo said everybody's prayers in the world were with the Ukrainian people. And I talked about how, like, mine weren't, right? I'm not that I, have anything against the Ukrainian people. But what I do is pray for, there's a 15-minute prayer that we do in heartfulness. Some of us do in heartfulness. The majority don't, in reality. But we pray for other people to come to spirituality. And we do this prayer for 15 minutes, and it's my favorite part of the practice. Like, transmission flows through, when there's just a thing that you can feel that's it's a good feeling. And it is about everybody in the world finding God inside of them, which is, to me, the solution, right? And in terms of these material events, like, I'm not, you have to be almost really arrogant to, not really, almost, you have to be arrogant to think you know what's best for other people in the world, and even yourself. You have to think in terms of, like, an American perspective, that this war, because it's Russia and they're the bad guys, and we're the good guys, we're Americans, and this war is not to our liking, so we're going to pray for these people. We're not going to pray for the Iraqis that America, destroyed their country, their government, right? Wrecked their country and made it worse. Or Afghanistan. Like all these wars, we know the outcome was America wrecked 4 countries, right? Was trying to wreck Syria. So 3 countries, Libya, Afghanistan, and Iraq, for financial reasons and lies. And so, we're not praying for those people or just all the people suffering. There's 20 million people who are slaves in this world right now. Actual slaves, not, wage slaves or, like actual slaves owned by other people. 20 million people in the world, at least, conservative estimate. All the abuse that's going on. I mean, there's things happening everywhere. And some of it has to do with us. A lot of it has to do with the American, system, American people using up 20% of the world's physical resources for 5% of the population, right? So, not just here, but in Europe and just wealthy people everywhere and other people, and not just people, animals and environments and things are suffering, right? There's lots of tragedy to go around, lots of selfishness and just mistakes made by human beings. And just because this thing is being covered on TV and being focused doesn't mean that, we should be praying for one side or the other, right? In fact, we don't know what's going on. I mean, none of us really know what's going on. in terms of the media and the government are constantly lying to us. But I had one person who decided that, they wanted to, well, here, I'll just read the comment. I genuinely pray for the people of Ukraine, totally missing my point, right? I talked about prayer and, the significance of prayer and how there are these spiritual beings. You rise up to a certain level and you actually hear prayers and you're supposed to, facilitate some sort of, I made another person said, they clicked out of my video when I said, it's difficult to pray directly to God. And I gave an explanation of this, but this person, they just didn't want to hear it, right? And the explanation is that God is abstract. And what people think about God is having the way God was presented in the Old Testament as being some, narcissistic, vengeful, revengeful, wrathful God that is, very much like a man. And this idea that we are made in God's image on a physical level, on an egotistical level. And that's not true. Our soul is made in God's image. Our soul, not our physical body. God doesn't have a physical human body or these things, right? And so there are similarities. Our heart, the purity of our thought force in its purest form, those are all made in God's image. Human beings on the purest level are made in, are part of God, right? That's what that statement really means. It doesn't mean that God is some dude somewhere separate from everything and everybody else. And so to get to that purest state is where you need to be on a vibrational level to have prayers go directly to God and be understood, right? Because we're, complex beings and, with a lot of details, and God doesn't have a mind, doesn't have the consciousness that we have. God is, the essence of love. God doesn't have an ego. So praying to God is difficult for most people directly to God, because the prayers aren't going to be understood or heard in that way, right? Because we're praying on an egotistical level, right? Some sort of, ego-driven prayers. God, please do this. God, please make this thing stop, please. It's to do with some misery or unpleasant thing in our lives we want to get rid of. That is there for our spiritual benefit. And so God has given this, what is going to be a blessing, right? And the same way that these nuclear wars are going to be a blessing, or this nuclear war is going to be a blessing, or it can be a blessing, right? It's, a curse if you look at it one way, a blessing if you look at it another. But when you're praying for yourself or anybody else because of material circumstances, undesirable material circumstances, there's an arrogance there that you know better. Like you're saying, God, you made a mistake. God, this person's suffering because, you've effed up in some way. And I just want to let you know you effed up and these people are suffering. So, knock it off. And can you help them out, or can you help me out? I mean, that's what most prayers are. People thinking they know better, or, God, maybe you missed this thing. This bad thing's happened over here to me or somebody else. Can you make it stop, right? And so, it's an arrogance there. Like, we don't know why something's happening, and there's consequences. Going back, I missed this point. I wanted to talk about this in the initial, voiceover aspect of yesterday, last night, and this morning. That the consequence that we're about to receive, if this, thing goes nuclear, is, the most epic consequence. It's the most, defining, brutal backlash to our egotistical and demonic approach to life, right? Disconnecting ourselves from God, going against the will of God and nature, and then by our own hands, by our own, demonic technological development, there is this, backlash and a reversal that, slaps us in the face, right? And we've never, seen a consequence like this to the collective humanity, right? And the best thing we can pray for is that we understand that we've gone on the wrong path collectively, and we need to bring God into our lives, connect with God internally, not through some bogus religion that acts as a middleman, but as an actual spiritual pursuit where we connect to God inside ourselves. And then we're, in communication with God. And God lets us know, all of us individually and collectively, the right course of action. And we don't do stupid things like build nuclear weapons or, manipulate the economies of the world in some demonic, usury-based, debt-based system. And we don't overindulge and create, this like trillionaire, billionaire levels of wealth and, these hoarders of wealth and resources. I mean, it's just basically being out of balance, that we don't get out of balance where we're just focused on our material existence and our egos and our souls, right? Like that's, And so the best thing that we can pray for people is they achieve, we all achieve this together, but our brothers and sisters create this, this connection, using the heartfulness meditation as a vehicle, as a, an apparatus to facilitate this connection, to help people connect to God that's inside of them, and then develop this relationship, right? I mean, that's the proper way to pray. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramano definitely reporting from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.